Hello wonderful human beings. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about slow motion video.
Golden trinkets, mobile phone, expensive shoes, you can get your own. She's gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. She's gonna love you. Yeah, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you, babe. Cross my heart and hope to die.
Alright, so you see these epic slow motion videos popping up all over the internet and you're wondering how you can do it as well. Maybe you've tried slow motion video in the past and it just ends up being this blurry mess or this choppy mess. But fear not, young citizen of the internet, I'm here to help you guys today. A few of you on Instagram asked me for a tutorial on slow motion video because you saw the recent video I posted from Hong Kong. I used quite a few slow motion clips in this and I really enjoyed creating slow motion stuff with the new camera that I've got, so I thought I'd share that with you guys and how you can create some slow motion stuff yourself. If you're going to be creating slow motion video, it's essential that you understand what frame rate is, and it's actually very simple to understand what frame rate is. We're used to seeing 24, 25 or even 30 frames per second in the videos that we watch on YouTube. This video that is being shot right now is being shot at 24 frames per second. And even the movies that we watch are usually at 24 frames per second. This means that there are 24 individual images being captured every single second. And those are compiled together to form a video. Say if we've got 24 frames per second and we increase that to 60 frames per second. That now means we have 2.5 times as many frames as before. Now if we've got 60 frames that were shot over the same time period and we stretch those frames out, it's going to take us a longer time to get over the same amount of footage, essentially creating slow motion. Typically we would record slow motion video in either 60 or 120 frames per second. That's what most newer cameras can capture. I know that I have a Canon 600D and that shoots at 60 frames per second at 720p. So it's not HD, but it's good enough if you want to start out playing with some slow motion stuff and just creating some cool epic video. If you're like, I have an old camera and I don't feel like getting a new one or I can't afford a new one, there's something that we all have, and that is a cell phone. I know that the iPhone 7 Plus, which is the one that I have, at 1080p shoots 120 frames per second, and I think even 240 frames per second at 720p. So that's more than enough to slow your footage down a crazy amount. At 120 frames per second, if you were to slow that down to 25%, which is about 5 times slower what normal motion is, you'll be able to get epic slow motion video. Now if you've done photography before, you'll know what shutter speed is. And a lot of people get shutter speed and frame rate confused with one another, but they're not the same thing at all. I know that when I started out, I was just as confused as anybody, and I thought that if I set my shutter speed to 1/400th of a second, it meant that I was capturing 400 frames per second, which is not correct at all. Shutter speed is referring to the rate at which your shutter opens and closes for each individual frame that's captured, essentially controlling the amount of blur that you'll see in each image. Generally, a rule of thumb is to keep your shutter speed at twice what your frame rate is. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, keep your shutter speed at 1/48th of a second, which most cameras can't do, so maybe 1/50th of a second. So if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, set your shutter speed to 1/120th of a second. That's the general rule of thumb for video. But when you're shooting slow motion video, I actually prefer to keep it even higher. The reason for this is I like my frames to be sharp in between each image. This also helps if you're doing camera movements in slow motion, so the camera movement won't actually blur the image if you've got a higher shutter speed. I know that my hands aren't stable at all and I shake like crazy while I'm shooting video, and I know this because when I look at video afterwards, there's camera shake all the time. I don't know what's wrong with my hands. So increasing the shutter speed helps with that as well. So those are the two essential things that you need to know for slow motion video. Although there's one other thing we need to make sure that we get right, and that is lighting. A lot of people forget this, but lighting is the most important factor when it comes to photo and video. If you've got bad lighting, you're gonna have a bad image. And it's especially noticeable if you're shooting slow motion. If you use indoor lights, such as tungsten lights, there's a flicker at either 50 Hz or 60 Hz, depending on where you are in the world. So to fix this, you can either hook up your lights to a direct current source like a generator or battery, which most of us don't have, or you can set the shutter of your camera to intervals of that frequency. So if your country uses 50 Hz power, set your shutter speed to 1/50th of a second. Alternatively, you can just forget about tungsten light altogether and get yourself an LED panel or a fluorescent light, which is actually what I'm using right now. And that eliminates flicker, depending on the quality of the panel that you get. Some of them do flicker if you're using slow motion, so just make sure that you read the reviews and get a good panel. And finally, if you don't want to buy a new light or you don't want to get a battery, there's our good old friend, the sun. The biggest light source out there, the best light source. It's super bright. It's more than enough light. In slow motion, you're going to need more light anyways, because your camera has less time to capture the same amount of light. So having a brighter light source is going to help with your slow motion video and just make it look better after all. So now all you have to do, once you've shot your clip in either 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, drag it into Premiere Pro, right click on it, and click speed and duration. Set that to 50% or 25% if you're shot at 120 frames per second. That'll stretch your clip out and you're good to go. It really is as simple as that. So get out there and start creating slow motion video. You've got a camera, you've got a phone, you've got some light, the sun, so start creating. If you guys like, you can even upload these videos to Instagram and I'll check them out. Just tag my account, it's up here. I'm excited to see what you guys create with your slow motion skills. If you guys want to know more about slow motion or if there's something that I didn't cover, just comment below, drop me a message on Instagram or comment on one of my photos and I'll try and answer as best as I can. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you liked the video, don't forget to like the video. Hit the subscribe button to see more stuff like this in the future. I make videos very often. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers guys.